First contact and miscalculation. The quantum sensors aboard the Aldarian survey vessel Eternal Dawn registered the anomaly before its crew even noticed the small research station orbiting Europa. Chief Observer Nilith's crystalline appendages shimmered with excitement as she studied the readings. The humans had achieved quantum entanglement communication far earlier in their development than any other known species. Yet this remarkable achievement stood in stark contrast to their apparent technological priorities. While their quantum physics rivaled the Aldarian Confederation's best work, their military capabilities seemed remarkably underdeveloped. No energy shields protected their orbital stations. Their vessels lacked the typical array of weapon systems that most spacefaring races considered essential. Most peculiar, Nilith transmitted to her fellow observers. They've mastered principles that took our people millennia to understand, yet they leave themselves virtually defenseless. The Eternal Dawn had spent 3 cycles studying human outposts across their solar system, maintaining careful distance to avoid detection. Each observation reinforced their initial assessment. Humanity appeared to be a species of peaceful scholars, more interested in understanding the universe than conquering it. In the great chamber of the Aldarian High Council, First Speaker Lysander's bioluminescent patterns pulsed with authority as he addressed the assembled representatives. The holographic displays showed footage from various human research installations, teams of scientists working collaboratively, sharing data freely between stations. Our analysis is conclusive, Lysander announced. Humanity represents a unique opportunity for the Confederation. Their scientific aptitude is remarkable, yet they lack the aggressive tendencies that typically make first contact scenarios so precarious. They've devoted their resources to research rather than warfare. The Council's initial contact plan reflected their confidence in this assessment. They would approach Earth openly, with a fleet of their most impressive vessels, a display of benevolent power meant to shepherd humanity into the galactic community under Aldarian protection. What the Aldarians failed to understand was that humanity's apparent defensive vulnerability wasn't a sign of weakness or naivety. It was a choice, born of hard-learned lessons and careful calculation. Dr. Sarah Chen, Earth Defense Command's Chief of Strategic Analysis, stood before the United Earth Council as alerts flashed across the quantum detection grid. Her voice remained steady as she delivered her report. The alien fleet matches no known configuration in our database. Their approach vector suggests a planned first contact scenario, but their formation is inherently intimidating, whether they realize it or not. Council President Marcus Rodriguez studied the tactical display with eyes that had seen humanity through its first tentative steps into space. Their positioning tells us everything we need to know about their assumptions, he noted. They think we're defenseless scientists who need protection. They haven't found our Aegis platforms because they weren't looking for them. The Aegis Defense Network had been humanity's greatest secret, a series of quantum-cloaked platforms housing advanced weapon systems and autonomous defense units. Earth had learned long ago that peace was best preserved through quiet strength, rather than obvious displays of force. When the Aldarian fleet arrived in high Earth orbit, their sensors detected only research stations and civilian vessels. First Speaker Lysander's greeting, broadcast on all frequencies, reflected their misunderstanding. People of Earth, we come to welcome you into the galactic community and offer you the protection of the Aldarian Confederation. The response they received was not what they expected. President Rodriguez's voice carried centuries of human diplomatic experience. We thank the Aldarian Confederation for their generous offer. However, humanity has long stood on its own terms. We welcome peaceful dialogue between equals, but we do not require protection. Lysander's bioluminescence flickered with confusion. This wasn't how first contact scenarios usually proceeded with developing species. His response came tinged with paternalistic concern. Surely you understand that the galaxy holds many dangers. Your lack of defensive capabilities. Perhaps, Dr. Chen interrupted smoothly, you should reconsider your assumptions about our capabilities. At her signal, the Aegis platforms decloaked simultaneously. Thousands of advanced defense platforms and autonomous units shimmered into view, having silently surrounded the Aldarian fleet during their approach. The Aldarian sensors went wild as they suddenly detected the true extent of Earth's defensive network. Their tactical officers reported in panic. Humanity's weapons technology was far more advanced than they had imagined, and their defensive positioning was flawless. "We believe," President Rodriguez continued calmly, "that true peace comes not from displays of force, but from mutual respect and understanding. We've chosen to focus on scientific advancement not because we are unable to defend ourselves, but because we prefer to extend a hand in friendship first. However, that hand is backed by strength when needed." First Speaker Lysander's crystalline form pulsed with new colors, ones that indicated a rapid reassessment of everything they thought they knew about humanity. They had expected to find simple scholars in need of protection. Instead, they had found equals who had mastered both the arts of peace and the necessities of war. "We appear to have made some incorrect assumptions," Lysander acknowledged, his tone now carrying genuine respect. "Perhaps we should begin again. As equals." The human representative smiled. This was exactly why they had chosen their path of hidden strength. True diplomatic relations could only begin once both parties understood each other clearly. "We would welcome that," President Rodriguez replied. "And perhaps we can start by discussing something we've noticed about quantum entanglement that your scientists might find interesting." The Aldarians would later mark this day in their historical records not just as first contact with humanity, but as the day they learned that appearances could be deceiving, and that true wisdom lay in understanding that peace and strength were not mutually exclusive concepts, but rather two sides of the same coin that humanity had mastered long ago. The breaking point. 6 months after first contact, the galaxy's delicate political balance began to crack. The Aldarian Confederation's revelation about humanity's hidden strength had sent ripples through galactic society, but not everyone drew the right lessons from that encounter. The Kryvax Dominion saw an opportunity where the Aldarians had seen wisdom. Admiral Venera watched the tactical display aboard his flagship, the Merciless Dawn, as his fleet moved silently through the void toward the human colony of New Horizon. Unlike the Aldarians, the Kryvax had no intention of announcing their arrival. Their stealth technology was unmatched in known space, or so they believed. "These humans are clever, hiding their strength." Venera's mandibles clicked as he addressed his command staff. "But they've spread themselves too thin. Their outer colonies can't possibly maintain the same level of hidden defenses as their homeworld." Deep within New Horizons Command Center, Dr. Maya Patel watched a different set of displays. The quantum detection grid had picked up the Kryvax fleet long before they thought they were in range. She allowed herself a small smile as she initiated the colony's defense protocols with a series of precise commands. "They never think to look for the quiet solutions," she murmured, as hidden generators across the colony powered up. Years of research into quantum field manipulation hadn't just given humanity better communications, it had also led to innovations that other races had never considered. The Kryvax fleet was less than an hour from attack position when their sensors detected something unusual. The space around New Horizons seemed to shimmer, like heat waves rising from hot pavement. Admiral Venera leaned forward in his command chair, his compound eyes reflecting the strange readings on his displays. "Analysis," he barked. His science officer's response came tinged with confusion. "The readings are impossible, Admiral. The space around the colony appears to be folding." Humanity had learned long ago that the best defense wasn't always a bigger gun. The quantum fold generators around New Horizon weren't weapons in the traditional sense. Instead, they altered the varied fabric of space-time, creating a maze of dimensional pockets and false paths that would trap any hostile force in a labyrinth of their own confusion. As the Kryvax fleet pressed forward, they found themselves separated, ships appearing to be kilometers apart on sensors, while being effectively isolated from each other by layers of folded space. Their much-vaunted stealth technology meant nothing when the very space they traversed refused to behave as expected. Clever, Dr. Patel transmitted to her defense team. They're maintaining formation despite the spatial distortions. Time for Phase 2. Across New Horizon, hidden hangars opened, releasing swarms of autonomous defense drones. But these weren't the traditional combat units other races employed. Each drone carried a quantum entanglement core, allowing them to navigate the folded space with precision, while projecting false sensor readings that made it impossible for the Krivax to distinguish real threats from phantom signals. Admiral Venra's flagship rocked as something struck its shields, but the sensors showed no attackers. His gunners fired at sensor contacts that vanished and reappeared elsewhere instantly, impossible to track or predict. The sophisticated Krivax combat AI systems, trained on traditional warfare, found themselves unable to adapt to an environment where space itself seemed to be their enemy. This is impossible. Venra raged as another impact rattled his ship. Where are they? How are they doing this? The answer came not in the form of weapons fire, but as a transmission that somehow cut through the chaos of folded space. Dr. Patel's voice was calm and measured as it filled the Krivax command deck. Admiral Venra, your fleet is currently trapped in a quantum maze of our design. Your weapons cannot target what they cannot properly perceive, and your ships cannot retreat through space they cannot navigate. We are prepared to demonstrate more direct defensive capabilities if necessary, but we would prefer to avoid bloodshed. In that moment, Venra understood the true depth of his miscalculation. The humans hadn't just hidden their strength, they had fundamentally reimagined what strength meant. While other races focused on building bigger ships and more powerful weapons, humanity had learned to reshape reality itself. You believe this display will force our surrender? Venra challenged, though his voice lacked its earlier confidence. No, Admiral, Dr. Patel replied. We believe it will make you think. Your stealth technology is impressive, but you use it simply to hide. We learn to hide not just our presence, but to obscure the very nature of space itself. You build weapons to destroy. We build tools that render destruction impossible. The difference is philosophical as much as technological. As if to emphasize her point, the quantum fold generators increased their output. The Krivax ships found themselves drifting further apart, each vessel now effectively isolated in its own pocket of altered spacetime. They could still communicate, still operate their systems, but they could no longer function as a coherent military force. The choice is yours, Admiral, Dr. Patel continued. We can maintain this state indefinitely, or we can guide your ships safely out of the quantum maze. But know this, every human colony, every outpost, every research station you might consider a soft target is protected by similar systems. We don't believe in leaving our people defenseless, but we also don't believe that defense must mean destruction. Admiral Venra's mandibles clicked slowly as he considered his options. His fleet, the pride of the Krivax Dominion, had been rendered impotent not by superior firepower, but by humanity's fundamentally different approach to conflict. They had expected to find an advanced version of the same strategies all spacefaring races employed. Instead, they had encountered something entirely new. Perhaps, he finally responded, his tone carrying a new note of respect. We should discuss terms for a peaceful withdrawal. As the quantum maze began to slowly unravel, allowing the Krivax fleet to reassemble under human guidance, Dr. Patel sent a brief update to Earth Defense Command. Situation resolved without casualties. The Krivax have learned what the Aldarians learned. Humanity's greatest strength lies not in our weapons, but in our ability to imagine solutions beyond the expected. The message would be added to humanity's growing diplomatic database, another example of how their unique approach to space exploration and defense was reshaping galactic politics, one encounter at a time. Unconventional warfare. The Grand Archive of the Galactic Assembly hummed with activity as representatives from a dozen species gathered to analyze the recent encounters with humanity. Arch-Curator Silara, her serpentine form coiled around her hovering platform, manipulated the holographic displays with practiced precision. Before her, recordings of the New Horizon incident played alongside data from other human encounters. Notice, she addressed the assembled scholars, how humans consistently avoid direct conflict while maintaining absolute control of their space. Her neural tendrils flickered with excitement as she highlighted key moments from various encounters. But not everyone shared her academic enthusiasm. In the shadows of the Outer Rim, the Swarm Collective had been watching too, and they saw humanity's refusal to engage in direct combat as a weakness to exploit. They would prove that all the clever tricks in the universe couldn't stand against overwhelming biological force. The first wave of swarm bioships emerged from hyperspace near the human mining outpost of Ceres Deep. Unlike previous attackers, the swarm didn't rely on technology that could be fooled by quantum manipulation. Their ships were living creatures, guided by instinct and collective intelligence rather than computers and sensors. Station Director James Chen watched the incoming swarm with outward calm, though his fingers moved rapidly across his neural interface console. "They think biological weapons will work where mechanical ones failed," he transmitted to his defense team. "Time to show them why that's a mistake." The swarm expected to find standard defensive measures, shields, weapons, perhaps even the quantum mazes that had trapped the Kryvax. Instead, they encountered something entirely different. As their bioships approached Ceres Deep, they began to receive signals that their primitive nervous systems couldn't ignore. Dr. Rita Santos, head of xenobiology at Ceres Deep, had spent years studying the fundamental similarities between all space-capable life forms. Every species that evolves to survive in space develops certain common characteristics. She explained to her team as they activated the bioresonance array, including very specific vulnerabilities. The bioresonance fields emanating from Ceres Deep weren't designed to kill or even harm the swarm bioships. Instead, they transmitted signals that the creatures' nervous systems interpreted as warnings from their own kind, markers of territory already claimed by a superior predator. The Swarm Collective's hive mind reeled in confusion as their first wave of bioships began to retreat instinctively. This wasn't the response of prey using technology to defend itself. This was the presence of something their deepest genetic memory recognized as an apex predator. "Fascinating," Dr. Santos observed, monitoring the swarm's reactions. "They genuinely believed that biological warfare would be our weakness. They never considered that understanding biology could be our strength." The second wave of bioships pressed forward, driven by the collective's conscious override of their instincts. But humanity's defense had only begun. As these ships came within range, they encountered clouds of engineered microorganisms, another product of humanity's extensive biological research. These microscopic defenders weren't weapons in the traditional sense. They didn't attack or destroy the swarm's bioships. Instead, they began to alter the complex chemical signals that the swarm used to coordinate their actions, introducing subtle changes that confused and disoriented the collective consciousness controlling the attack. From his command center, Director Chen watched as the mighty swarm fleet began to move in increasingly erratic patterns. "They're used to facing enemies that try to kill them," he noted. "They don't know how to handle an opponent that simply refuses to play by their rules." The swarm's collective consciousness frantically tried to reassert control over its forces, but the more it struggled, the more confused its bioships became. The carefully engineered microorganisms weren't just disrupting their communication. They were introducing new patterns that made the entire collective question its own decisions. "Send the final signal," Chen ordered, and Dr. Santos activated the last phase of their defense. The bioresonance array pulsed once more, but this time it transmitted something different. A complex series of biochemical markers that the swarm's genetic memory associated with submission to a superior life form. It was the biological equivalent of a white flag, but one that spoke directly to the swarm's most basic instincts. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The bioships began to withdraw, their retreat driven by both conscious decision and instinctive response. The Swarm Collective had encountered something unprecedented. an enemy that could speak directly to their biological nature and convince it to stand down. As the last bioship disappeared into hyperspace, Director Chen opened a channel to Earth Defense Command. "Threat neutralized," he reported. "The swarm's attempt to exploit our perceived biological vulnerability has failed." Dr. Santos' team's research proved invaluable. In the aftermath, as news of the encounter spread through galactic channels, the various spacefaring races were forced to reconsider their understanding of humanity once again. The species they had initially dismissed as peaceful scholars had demonstrated yet another layer of sophistication in their approach to defense. The Arch-Curator Silara added the records of the Sarah's Deep incident to the Grand Archive, her neural tendrils pulsing with scholarly satisfaction. Humans, she noted in her official analysis, continue to demonstrate that true strength lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the wisdom to understand and adapt. They defend themselves not by overpowering their adversaries, but by comprehending them so thoroughly that conflict becomes unnecessary. In the weeks that followed, requests for scientific and cultural exchange with human institutions increased dramatically. The galaxy was beginning to realize that humanity's apparent focus on research and understanding wasn't a sign of weakness. It was the source of their most formidable strength, the art of deterrence. The central chambers of the Galactic Assembly buzzed with an energy not seen in centuries. Representatives from every major spacefaring race had gathered for an unprecedented session. At the center of attention stood Ambassador Elena Torres, Earth's first representative to the Assembly, her presence commanding respect without demanding it. The recent series of encounters with humanity had shaken the foundations of galactic politics. The Eldarians had learned about hidden strength, the Kryvax about spatial manipulation, and the Swarm about biological mastery. But it was what happened next that truly transformed the galaxy's understanding of human nature. "We extend an open invitation," Ambassador Torres announced to the assembled delegates, "for any species to participate in our new collaborative defense initiative. We believe that true security comes not from isolation, but from cooperation and mutual understanding." The proposal was revolutionary. Humanity wasn't just offering to share their defensive technologies. They were proposing to help each species develop their own unique approaches to security based on their inherent strengths. High Commander Rixes of the militant hegemony rose from his seat, his cybernetic enhancements gleaming under the chamber's lights. "You would share your secrets with potential adversaries." His metallic voice carried both skepticism and curiosity. Ambassador Torres smiled. "What we offer isn't secrets, Commander. It's understanding. Each species has unique characteristics that can be turned to defensive advantage. The Eldarian's crystalline technology, the Kryvax's mastery of stealth, the Swarm's biological adaptation, all hold potential that hasn't been fully explored. In a secure facility orbiting Jupiter, that philosophy was already being put into practice. Dr. Victor Chang, director of the Collaborative Defense Research Center, worked alongside scientists from a dozen species. The facility had become a living testament to humanity's approach to galactic security. Traditional military thinking focuses on overwhelming force, Dr. Chang explained to a group of visiting dignitaries. We focus on understanding and adaptation. Watch. The demonstration area activated, showing a simulation of a Kryvax stealth ship attempting to penetrate a defense grid. But instead of traditional countermeasures, the defense system incorporated crystalline sensor arrays developed in collaboration with Eldarian scientists, enhanced by quantum field manipulation. By combining the natural strengths of different species, Chang continued, we create defensive systems that are both more effective and less destructive. The goal isn't to win conflicts, it's to make them unnecessary. The implications of this approach rippled through galactic society. Species that had been locked in centuries-old arms races began to reconsider their positions. The militant hegemony, long known for its aggressive expansion, found itself intrigued by the possibility of security through cooperation rather than domination. But perhaps the most profound change came in an unexpected form. The Zarkali, an ancient race known for their isolation and technological superiority, broke centuries of silence to request participation in the initiative. Ambassador Torres met with the Zarkali representative, first Speaker Ixal, in a specially prepared chamber that accommodated their unique environmental needs. The crystalline being's form shimmered with patterns that the best xenolinguists were still working to fully understand. Your species intrigues us. Ixal communicated through a combination of light patterns and quantum resonance. We have watched as you transformed potential adversaries into partners. You achieved through cooperation what we sought through isolation. The conversation that followed would be recorded in the Assembly's archives as a turning point in galactic history. The Zarkali revealed that their isolation had been driven by fear, not of military defeat, but of cultural contamination. Humanity's approach offered a way to engage with the galaxy while maintaining their unique identity. The strength of our approach, Torres explained, lies in embracing differences rather than fearing them. Each species that joins our initiative brings new perspectives, new capabilities, and new possibilities. In the months that followed, the effects of this philosophical shift became increasingly apparent. The Collaborative Defense Initiative led to innovations that transcended military applications. Aldarian crystalline technology, combined with human quantum physics and Zarkali energy manipulation, gave birth to new forms of faster-than-light travel. The swarm's biological adaptability, guided by human genetic research, opened new frontiers in medical science. But perhaps most importantly, the initiative fostered understanding between species that had long viewed each other with suspicion or hostility. The process of working together to develop defensive capabilities naturally led to cultural exchange and diplomatic breakthroughs. Dr. Chang observed this transformation from his research center with satisfaction. We're not just developing better ways to prevent conflict, he noted in his logs. We're creating a galactic community that makes conflict increasingly obsolete. The art of deterrence, as humanity had conceived it, proved to be not just about preventing war, but about promoting peace through understanding. Each species that joined the initiative discovered that their perceived weaknesses, when properly understood and applied, could become unique strengths. As Ambassador Torres prepared for another session of the Assembly, she reflected on humanity's journey from a seemingly vulnerable species to a catalyst for galactic transformation. Their strength had never lain in weapons or technology alone, but in their ability to imagine and implement a different way of existing in the cosmos. The galaxy was learning that true deterrence came not from the ability to destroy, but from the capacity to understand, adapt, and cooperate. It was a lesson that would reshape interstellar relations for generations to come. A new understanding. 5 years after the establishment of the Collaborative Defense Initiative, the galaxy had changed in ways few could have predicted. The Grand Observation Deck of Harmony Station, a massive structure jointly constructed by 12 species at the intersection of major trade routes, offered a perfect view of this transformation. Dr. Sarah Chen, now serving as the Director of Interspecies Relations, stood beside Arch-Curator Silara as they watched ships of various designs move gracefully through the surrounding space. Each vessel incorporated elements of multiple species technologies, a visual representation of how far galactic cooperation had come. "Do you remember," Chen asked, "when everyone thought we were defenseless scholars?" She gestured toward a passing ship that combined Aldarian crystalline architecture with human quantum fields and Zarkali energy systems. Silara's neural tendrils flickered with amusement, a misconception that proved fortunate for all of us. Though I suspect you knew exactly what you were doing even then. The truth was more complex than either the humans' early observers or their would-be adversaries had guessed. Humanity's approach hadn't been a carefully planned strategy, but rather the natural evolution of their collective experience. Centuries of conflict on Earth had taught them that true security couldn't be achieved through force alone. In the station's central research hub, Ambassador Torres led a delegation of new species representatives through the latest developments. The Engtheri, a recently contacted race of energy beings, watched in fascination as human and Zarkali scientists demonstrated a new form of shield technology that could protect against both physical and energy-based attacks. The key was learning to see defense as an expression of understanding rather than a show of force, Torres explained. Each breakthrough comes from combining different perspectives and approaches. The demonstration area showed holographic recordings of recent innovations, quantum crystalline navigation systems that made spatial ambushes impossible, biological sensors that could detect and communicate with unknown life forms before conflicts could arise, and energy matrices that could redirect hostile forces harmlessly into subspace. But the most profound changes weren't technological. In the station's diplomatic quarter, representatives who would once have regarded each other with suspicion now collaborated on joint ventures. The militant hegemony, once known only for its military might, had become a leading force in developing defensive systems that protected without threatening. High Commander Rixus, his cybernetic systems now streamlined and less overtly martial, shared his perspective with a group of young diplomats. We thought power came from the ability to destroy. Humans showed us it comes from the ability to understand and adapt. The Swarm Collective, too, had undergone a remarkable transformation. Their bioships, once instruments of conquest, now served as living research vessels, their unique biological abilities contributing to scientific discoveries that benefited all species. Their latest project, a collaboration with human xenobiologists, focused on developing organic space stations that could adapt to the needs of any species. In the station's Quantum Communications Center, Dr. Victor Chang coordinated with teams across the galaxy. The network they had built didn't just share defensive capabilities. It fostered cultural exchange, scientific collaboration, and diplomatic dialogue. Potential conflicts were now routinely resolved before they could escalate, not through threats or shows of force, but through mutual understanding and cooperative problem-solving. The galaxy was full of species trying to protect themselves from each other. Chang reflected during a recorded interview for the Grand Archive. What we needed wasn't better weapons or stronger shields. We needed to recognize that true security comes from working together. The interview was interrupted by an alert from the Deep Space Monitoring Network. A new species had been detected, one that showed signs of achieving faster-than-light travel. In the past, such a discovery would have triggered defensive preparations and diplomatic maneuvering for advantage. Instead, representatives from various species gathered in the station's council chamber to plan a welcome. The lessons of the past years had been well learned. First contact would be handled not with displays of power or offers of protection, but with an invitation to join a community built on mutual respect and cooperation. As Ambassador Torres prepared the initial greeting, she smiled at the irony. The galaxy had once seen humans as vulnerable because they prioritized understanding over aggression. Now that same approach had created a peace more secure than any fleet or weapon could have achieved. We should thank those who underestimated us, she told her staff as they crafted the message. Their misconceptions gave us the opportunity to show that there's more than one way to be strong. In the observation deck, Dr. Chen and Arch-Curator Silara watched as ships from a dozen species moved into position to welcome the newcomers. Each vessel carried technology and knowledge developed through cooperation. Each crew represented the triumph of understanding over fear. They used to say humans feared war, Silara noted, her neural tendrils forming patterns of contemplation. But what you really feared was the failure to find a better way. Chen nodded, watching as the combined fleet prepared for humanity's favorite kind of first contact, one that began with an outstretched hand rather than a raised shield. The galaxy was full of species trying to prove they were the strongest, she said. We just wanted to prove there was a different kind of strength. As Harmony Station's quantum arrays prepared to broadcast their greeting to the new species, the message reflected the journey that had brought them all to this point. It wasn't just an invitation to join the galactic community. It was proof that the strongest defense isn't a wall that keeps others out, but a bridge that brings them together. The galaxy had learned that lesson well, and now they stood ready to share it with others. Together, they had created something unprecedented. A peace built not on fear or force, but on the simple, powerful idea that understanding your neighbors is better than defending against them. And somewhere, in the vast depths of space, a new civilization prepared to receive a message that would offer them not protection or power, but something far more valuable: the chance to be part of a future where strength meant more than the ability to win wars. It meant the wisdom to make them unnecessary.